Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Psychonomic Society One World seminar series. I'm really excited. This is our final event of this academic year. As a reminder, you can watch past events on our website. We have recordings of all of those posted there. Tell your friends, go watch some of the fabulous speakers that we've had earlier this year and in past years. For today, you've got access to the chat, and I think our speaker might be having you use that for some interactive pieces of the presentation. But for your questions for the Q&A at the end, please put those in the Q&A box. That helps us keep track of which questions we've answered, which we haven't, and also allows you to upvote different questions that you want to make sure that we have the speaker answer at the end of the talk. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Jiaying Zhao. JZ is a professor in the Department of Psychology in the Institute for Resources, Environment, and Sustainability at the University of British Columbia. She's also a faculty affiliate with the Center for Effective Global Action at UC Berkeley, and invited researcher at JPAL at MIT. JZ completed her PhD in cognitive psychology at Princeton, and she holds the King Charles III Coronation Medal and Killam Research Prize. JZ uses psychological principles to design behavioral solutions to address financial and environmental sustainability challenges, such as climate change and poverty. And today, she'll be talking to us about Leave the Lights On, how joyful decisions can save our species. Please join me in welcoming our speaker.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Thank you all for being here today. I am joining you today from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and I'm excited to share this work and my new book that's coming out in a couple weeks. So today I'm going to talk about Leave the Lights On, how joyful decisions can save our species. I'm going to start with a poll. This is the million-dollar question in behavioral science, which is, which intervention do you think is the most effective at changing human behavior? So I would love for you to vote in the chat, which I'm monitoring here. Is it an intervention that draws people's attention or changes people's perception? So this is their conscious interpretation of the message or information. Or 3, intervention that prevents forgetting, like a reminder. Or 4, reduces the effort involved. Or intervention 5, that increases people's intrinsic motivation. Or finally, an intervention that increases extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic defined as values, beliefs, identities that are external, that are separate from external factors, and extrinsic motivation defined as any external motivators such as fines, rewards, punishment, financial incentives. So in the chat, I would love to see which option you think, or which intervention you think is the most effective at changing human behavior. You can put in 1 to 6, any number. I'm not seeing any chat, but I hope people are voting at this moment. Oh yeah, okay, I see some chat coming in. I think the Q&A is for questions, but the chat will be for your votes. If you, yeah, great, awesome.
Looks like Bill, looks like they don't actually have access to the chat, but we can. The speaker can see the answers in the Q&A, so that'll work for our purposes, I guess.
Okay, put it in the Q&A then. Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so to answer this question, my student and I did a meta-analysis where we looked at 7 databases of published research from 2008 to 2021. We only included field experiments. So these are randomized controlled trials in the real world as opposed to in the lab or online that actually measured real behaviors as opposed to self-reports. And we ended up including 184 studies with over 2 million participants in this meta-analysis. And after we get all the studies screened in, we separated them based on these 6 cognitive processes, from attention to memory to motivations. So this is the same 6 options that you were just voting on. And we further looked at the effect size. This is measured by Cohen's d of the 6 cognitive processes. And it turns out that the most effective intervention with the largest effect size is effort. So any intervention that changes effort, that could mean makes things easy, reducing effort, or increasing effort, or making the action harder to do. That intervention has the largest effect size by far compared to the other interventions. So what this means in specific interventions is following. So here I'm showing a list of interventions we looked at. And as you can see, among the top 5, 4 of them are effort-based interventions. So like convenience, inconvenience, default, accessibility, etc. So on the Cohen's D's column, you can see the effect size, which are pretty large for these effort-based interventions. So that's great news. But when you go down the list, you also see that incentives. So this is extrinsic motivations. So it could be financial, non-financial, conditional incentives also have moderate effect size. And one thing that's interesting is gain frame. So even framing the gains as opposed to loss frame, which is further down the line, is also pretty effective. Gain frame is actually more effective than loss frame. And what this means is that if you want to change human behavior in any domain, in any behavior, 1, you want to make it easy. And 2 is you want to make it rewarding. And I want to point out here is the most studied interventions in the psychology literature are reminder and social norm. So if you look at the K, that's the number of studies in each intervention. They actually have a pretty small effect size in our meta-analysis. So they are, despite their popularity in the literature, they actually don't have the biggest impact on behavior change. At least this is measured in real behavior change as opposed to self-reports. I think self-reports will be a different measure, which we did not look at. Okay, so what this meta-analysis suggests is here are the 2 ingredients in behavior change, for humans at least, is ease and reward. And what I want to talk about today is I want to kind of tap into the sweet spot, which are interventions that are both easy and rewarding. And I think we need these 2 ingredients together to fight, challenging environmental crises like climate change and pollution. So let me start with food waste. This is one particular behavior. So 1/3 of all food produced globally is wasted. And half of the food emissions come from waste, not from the food themselves, but from the waste. And 1/3 of the food waste emissions come from consumers, not from farmers or businesses or trucks, but from consumers like us. So one way to reduce the food waste emissions from consumers is composting, because of the more kind of effective breakdown of the organic materials. Composting saves a lot of emissions from landfill, from dumping food in just as waste. And in fact, over 10 years ago, the city of Vancouver effectively banned food waste from garbage. And this is the bylaw that the mayor signed into effect, banning food waste from the city. So you cannot throw food waste in garbage anymore. That's illegal. And the city actually launched a whole campaign that is still going on. It's been running for over 10 years to say, hey, food isn't garbage. Please dispose food items into the compost bin, which the city also provides. But despite the law change or the infrastructure change, the composting rate in Vancouver is still pretty low. It's at 63%. And the Canadian average, it's actually we're one of the best countries in the world in composting, is still at 76%. So as an Asian who's been trained to see these stats as a fail, my question is simply to ask, how can we bring those numbers higher up, despite the law change, despite the fact that this is now the legal thing to do? How can we better align human behavior with policy, with infrastructure, et cetera? So we did a field experiment on composting with a property management company, where we randomly assigned one of the residential buildings in different conditions. And we simply made composting easier in different conditions. So ease is defined as the Euclidean distance between your family door, essentially your door, to the bins. So this is the least convenient condition. This is the status quo in most buildings, multifamily residences here, which is the green bin is placed all the way in the back outside the building where you have to walk pretty far to get to. The convenient condition is where we place the compost bin, the green bin, on the ground floor of each building. So you just have to travel downstairs to compost. And the most convenient condition is we placed a compost bin on every floor. So you just have to leave your room. You don't have to travel downstairs to compost. And we measured the volume, the weight of compost per week per unit. And what we found here was compost volume more than doubled when the bin was on your floor, just by the elevator, as opposed to on the ground floor or all the way in the back. So just making composting easier, reducing the distance walked or traveled, can increase a compost volume. And we further replicated this intervention in high-rise buildings. So this is buildings with 20 floors of residences. We will put the bins 5 feet away from people's doors versus 41 feet away, all the way to 163 feet away. And we measured the compost volume. And so the compost volume increased by 139% when the bins are 5 feet away versus 41 feet away. So that's a huge change in volume just by moving the bins closer. The same effect applied to recycling. This is paper recycling and bottle recycling. So that's a massive effect just by virtue of making things easier. Now, this intervention is pretty easy, but may not be particularly rewarding. And this is what I mean by not rewarding, is placing the compost bins closer to people's doors. One, can be smelly, especially in the summertime. It actually smells terrible in the hallway. It requires more bins, and it requires more custodial service to manage those bins. So it's costly. And so the question is, who's paying for it? Would the residents like it if you implement this intervention? This may be one barrier, actual infrastructural and financial barrier for this ease intervention. And I think the way forward is for every new building to be developed, the building has to have smart chutes. So these are chutes that are available to people's homes, essentially outside your door, 5 feet away from your door, that you can separate your waste in. You can push a button and you can recycle or dispose waste. That will be the best system to implement. I think that's the future intervention for new buildings, but it's hard to implement this in old buildings or existing buildings. Okay, so then the next question for me is, how do we make it cheaper? Is there an easier and cheaper way to make composting recycling happen? And this is when we turn into signage. And signage is probably the most confusing things in life, where there's a ton of information. There's yes and no items on the board. There's so much texts. It's overwhelming. And that's true for a lot of signage that we see in the real world. So how can we increase the cognitive ease in recycling decisions or sorting decisions, in addition to or above and beyond the physical ease? So to cognitive ease is now kind of implemented in the following ways. So in the lab, we got people to come in and to sort virtual waste. So they have to move their hand to pick up a projected waste on a screen, and then they have to kind of pick it up just with motion with their finger and move that image to one of the 4 bins that we project on the screen. And we track their hand movement as they sort. So they have to sort waste in the following conditions. Either the image, the signage is purely pictures or texts. So pictures are easier to process, to read than texts. Or we show yes items. So these are permitted items compared to both yes and no items combined. And We also have people in, see a consistent order of bins. So the garbage, compost, recycling, and paper, all of these are in the same order across trials, versus the bins are presented in a random order every single trial. And what we measured was sorting efficiency. So this is accuracy of your sorting divided by the response time. So the higher accuracy, the less response time, the more efficient you are at sorting. So what we found in this study was showing pictures increased sorting efficiency by 25% compared to texts. So that's great. So that what this means is show pictures as opposed to texts. Another finding we had was showing yes items only increased sorting efficiency by 12% by combination of yes and no items. So yes, just so the lesson there is just show yes items. Don't bother with the no items. And a consistent order of bins increased sorting efficiency by 37%. That's the biggest impact or effect that we see compared to a random order every single trial. So the three direct implications are show images, show yes items only, and keep the bin order consistent. And that is what UBC campus has implemented. They have standardized the bins across campus. Likewise, the city of Vancouver has taken all three insights by showing just images, standardizing the bin orders, and just the yes items. Don't bother with the no items. So that's great implementation from our study. But the problem with signage is there's still a disconnect from our immediate actions now to the downstream consequences on the environment. So it's easy for me to throw stuff away right now, and I don't need to think about it. I can forget about it. But we don't see the downstream consequences of our actions. We don't see where that bottle goes, right? So to connect that, well, actually, I think this disconnect could be another reason for lack of change, is I don't see the impact of my actions right away. So to bridge this gap, we ran another field experiment where we teamed up with a company and a nonprofit organization called where we randomly assigned this high-rise office building, the different floors in the building into different conditions. And the goal is to reduce plastic waste in this building. So we randomly assigned the buildings to the control group, which is the business as usual condition where the signage was small, hard to read, a lot of texts. And so that's some floors are randomly assigned to that. Then we also assigned some floors into the improved signage condition where we simplify the signs. So we really blew up the visuals. We just showed yes items. Or other floors were assigned to this improved signage plus a marine animal trapped in plastic debris. So now this is a dolphin swimming with a plastic bag with a message that says, break your plastic pattern, protect our ocean. This image is designed to connect your action right now to the downstream consequences on the ecosystems. And finally, we have another condition where it's a pledge. So it's simply to sign to be plastic wise, to reduce your plastic waste. So this animal conditions is what we are after in particular, to see whether connecting, our actions with the downstream consequences can have an impact. And this is the full set of intervention signage that we tried in this trial, where we showed turtles and dolphins trapped in plastic debris, in addition to the signage. And we measured plastic waste across all bins, or across all waste streams as a measure. And the only intervention that reduced plastic waste was the animal condition. So essentially showing the downstream consequences reduced plastic waste in our study by 18%. And that's really promising. And this is what I think prompted the company to scale their signage across different offices in different countries in their operations. But then you can see that this image is not necessarily positive. It's actually pretty negative because it's highlighting the negative impact of plastic waste on the marine life. So one question we had was, what if we turn this into something positive, such as showing a happy turtle swimming in pristine ocean? This highlights the positive impact of reducing plastic waste. So in a separate study conducted many years later, we found that the negative and positive imagery actually have the same impact when it comes to plastic waste reduction. So the lesson there is maybe we can show something positive to direct plastic waste or reduce plastic waste away from waste or even recycling streams. And that's kind of one lesson is, to show the positive impact of our change. So I'm going to switch to a different domain away from plastic waste. Now I'm going to turn into more specifically on recycling bottles. So imagine that you have to throw this bottle away, and in return, you can, get some money back. So I would love to see your vote again in the Q&A section. I want to see your choice. So imagine you have several choices. When you return this bottle or recycle this bottle, you have 100% chance, a guaranteed chance of getting 10 cents back. So this is option A. Or option B, you have 10% chance of getting $1 back. Or C, 1% chance of getting $10 back. Or 0.1% chance of getting $100 back. Or 0.01% chance of getting $1,000 back per bottle. So in the Q&A, vote A to E, which option would you like to have when you return this bottle? So as you can see that all 5 options have the same expected payoff of 10 cents per bottle. They just vary in terms of probability and magnitude of payoff. Okay, so after you vote, or as you vote, I want to tell you about option A. So option A is the current policy in British Columbia, in many countries in the world. So let's say in BC, as an example, you get 10 cents back every time you return or recycle a beverage container. And the return rate, the recycle rate in BC is 80%. So pretty high, not perfect. In Ontario, a different province, you get anywhere from 10 to 20 cents, depending on the size of the container. So larger bottles are 20 cents, small bottles are 10 cents. And their return rate is 85%. But I still don't think that's good enough. I see these rates as good, but not great. So how can we bring those levels higher up to even, close to 100%? And my reasoning here is 10, 20% are simply not motivating enough for the vast majority of the public. So how can we make it more rewarding? The lesson, the intervention we're trying is to turn that into a lottery, as the options you saw, the 5 options you just saw. So we ran a field study where we set up these bottle return stations across the city. We ran it in different provinces. And we get people to return bottles to us. And every time they return a bottle, we ask them to choose. Would you like to get 100%, so 10 cents back per bottle guaranteed, or a chance to win a bigger amount? And what we found in the study was the $1,000 was by far the most preferred choice in our participants. And the status quo, the law, the 10 cents per bag guaranteed is actually the least preferred in our sample. And after people made a choice, we draw the lottery right away on the computer, and we tell them how much they won. And most people, as you saw, as you would expect, actually nobody got the $1,000 because you need a massive amount of participants and bottles to reach to actually have to get the $1,000. Nobody got 1,000, nobody got 100, but some people got $10, some got $1 back. So actually, most people who did not choose the 10 cents did not get any money back. But despite that fact, we asked people anticipatory happiness. This is, it's essentially, how happy do you feel right now about the chance of winning some money in the study? And the $1,000 is associated with the highest level of anticipatory happiness in our sample, which is great. So they experience this temporary elevation of joy when they chose this $1,000 option. We measured their experienced happiness at the end, and there was no meaningful difference across the different options, which also means despite the fact that they didn't win, they did not feel worse off in being in the study. Now, in a separate randomized control trial that we randomly assigned people to these different reward options, the $1,000 led to a 54% increase in bottle returns compared to the 10-cent condition. So what this shows is that if we simply offer people a lottery, a chance to win a bigger amount, that could, one, increase bottle returns, helping us reach essentially reach 100% return rate, and also increase their anticipatory happiness at the same time. So this is the kind of the win-win situation intervention that we really need to increase recycling rate. And we're applying the same principle to reusables. So one argument is we don't need more single-use items. We need to get rid of single-use bottles and cups. Instead, we need to use reusables, like your own mug or cup or bottles that you bring. One way to incentivize that was with probabilistic reward. So we teamed up with a coffee shop in town where we convinced them, the coffee shop, to give us free coffee, or actually a chance to win free coffee if you bring your own mug. So every time you bring your own cup, you have a 10% chance of getting a free coffee from this coffee shop. Now, this coffee shop also has a chain location, a different location, where we did not provide this probabilistic reward as a control. So we looked at the amount of reusables as a proportion of total sales in the coffee shop. So in the control condition, the sad pattern was there's a decline in reusable rate among the customers. But in the treatment condition, once we implemented this probabilistic reward, that reusable rate shot up, meaning people are more likely to bring their cups when you offer them a chance, 10% chance to win free coffee. So once we've found these results, the Return It BC, which is the provincial program, the organization that runs recycling in BC, beverage container recycling, has now implemented this new program. It's called Return It to Win It. Now, every time you return a bottle, every bottle gives you certain points, and then you can use those points to earn some rewards. And that has taken off. And personally, I don't have the recent stats from Return It BC yet, but just personally, I have returned more bottles and I've gotten some prizes back. I've won some prizes with the points I earned by recycling bottles. And so that's a promising way to increase recycling rate. And I'm so glad to see this program actually, capitalizing on our insights that we got from these studies. Okay, so easy and reward works, but the critical question is here: for whom? Does it work for everybody or only a subset of the population? So one question we're after is breaking down the effects by subgroups, by demographics. And in this case, we tried, the different cognitive interventions from attention, perception, memory, effort to motivations to reduce single-use produce bags in grocery stores. And we recruited a bunch of people in the US, and we separated the group by, liberals versus conservatives, just by political orientation alone. And what we found was, by far, liberals are more reactive or show a bigger impact on produce bag, this plastic bag reduction. And the effects are mostly driven by liberals in our study. And conservatives, not so much. And only one intervention worked for conservatives, which is the extrinsic nudge. So if you attach a financial reward for this behavior, that's the only intervention that worked for conservatives, whereas a whole bunch more interventions worked for liberals. So this brings me to the kind of the polarization issue, particularly to environmental issues like climate change. And over the years, this is data, public opinion polls in the US, over the last decade or so, you see this polarization by liberals and conservatives. This is completely separated by party lines on climate change. It's unfortunate. It's a uniquely US and Canadian phenomenon. It does not exist in Europe or Asia or elsewhere in the world. But at least in North America, we see greater polarization on climate change over the years. So to demonstrate this, I hope my game will work here. It works better in person, but I'm going to try it on Zoom. This is a game I want you to participate in. So again, type your answer in the chat. I want you to, first of all, pay attention to a sequence of words that I'm going to show very quickly on the screen. And in this sequence of words, I want you to find two targets. So the first target is a string of numbers. The second target is a word in the color green. Okay, so find two targets in this sequence of words that I'm going to show quickly. Ready? Really pay attention and to see these two targets. Okay, here we go. All right, so what is the number in target 1? And what is target 2? So try to, I can show it again. I want to maybe let me show it again. It's a pretty quick sequence of words. Oh, let me just go back to the game. Target 1 were numbers. Target 2 a word in the color green. Okay, this is second try. Okay, I hope that's the Zoom screen refresh rate is high enough. So target 1 is a bunch of 5s, and target 2 is carbon. So I hope some of you actually saw it. So this game is called the Climate Attentional Blink Task. And this is a sequence of words that I just flash on the screen. And in this case, target 2 directly follows target 1. So this is what we call lag 1. And because target 2 directly follows target 1, target 2 is easily missed, as if your attention blinks. So this is kind of the standard attention blink task, except we put a climate word in there. So target 2 measures the attentional salience of the word. And in our study, target 2 is a climate-related word like carbon or a neutral word like coffee. And what we found, we ran this climate attentional blink task in the public, with people in the public, and we categorized the public into liberals, conservatives, who are concerned about climate change, and not as concerned. And this is a graph showing the correct response in detecting target 2, either target 2 being a climate word or a neutral word. So what we found was for liberals, they do show greater selective attention to climate words compared to neutral words. But we don't see a difference among conservatives between climate or neutral words. So what this means is there might be an attentional gap given your political orientation or your concern for the environment. The same news headline, the same words in the environment may not capture your attention depending on your prior motivations. So just showing images, showing words may not work because of this attention gap. And then we want to see whether this attention gap actually translates to behavior. So the question here is, can we draw attention to climate change evidence, and whether that biased attention subsequently influences climate action? So what we did in the different experiment was we showed global temperature change. So this is global, I think, surface temperature from NASA since 1880 to recent years. And we either painted the rising temperature in red or painted the flatter temperature in red compared to a control condition where the whole curve is gray. And we further eye-tracked people, looking at their visual attention as they were viewing this image. This is a heat map of their gaze on this curve. So the red did bias people's attention to the rising face or to the flatter face compared to the control condition. So after they viewed this image, did this rising or flatter temperature in different conditions, we presented 2 actions. These are 2 different climate actions: to either to stand with climate action, stand with Nature Conservancy, to call on U.S. leaders to stand strong on climate change, or to donate to Natural Resource Defense Council for cleaner air. And so this is intention measures in a survey. And so does biased attention actually alter actions? So in this analysis, what we found was it's a busy graph, but for petition signing and donation willingness, this is broken down by the 3 different conditions by liberals and conservatives. So what we found was for both measures, greater attention to evidence of climate change, which is the rising phase of global temperature, increased actions in liberals, but not the case for conservatives. So biasing attention, drawing attention deliberately to climate evidence works for people who care already about the issue, but didn't. In fact, the data actually shows a slight backfiring effect for conservatives. So depending on the prior motivations, the same intervention has very distinct impacts on behavior. Okay, so we actually wrote a review article a couple years ago summarizing all the biases, the cognitive biases of climate change, from attentional bias, perceptual bias, to single action bias, status quo bias. And we dug deeper to find the causes of these biases. And on top of that, we proposed debiasing tools that can mitigate these biases. So let me give you one example of the bias. So one of the bias is simply just we don't, you can call it pseudo inefficacy or single action bias, where we think taking one action is enough, or maybe I shouldn't take any actions because I don't know enough about the impact of my actions. So one cause here is lack of knowledge. I think that lack of knowledge of your impact can serve as an informational barrier to ease and reward this intervention. So to demonstrate this bias, I will have another quiz for you. So participate by typing your answers in the chat or the Q&A box. So here's a math test for those of you who are interested in math or slightly interested in numbers. How many miles can you drive a hybrid vehicle that produces the same amount of carbon emissions as driving 100 miles in a conventional car? So driving 100 miles in a conventional gasoline-powered car produces X amount of carbon emissions. That's equivalent to driving how many miles in a hybrid vehicle? So I would love to see your answer in the chat or in the Q&A. So if you have an answer in mind, type it out so I can see it. So the right answer, well, the accurate medium answer is 150 miles. So essentially hybrid vehicles are 50% more efficient than a gas vehicle. An EV is even higher. It's close to 200 miles for an EV. Okay, another question is, how many hamburgers do you have to give up to offset one flight from New York to Paris? So one transatlantic flight. How many hamburgers do you have to give up to offset the flight from New York to Paris? All right, I see some numbers coming in. This is my favorite question because almost everybody got it wrong. Even if you are an expert in climate science, they get it wrong too. So the right medium answer is about 300. Okay, another question is, this is a tough one. How many hours of now LED light bulb can you burn that emits the same amount of carbon emissions as doing one load of hand-dried laundry? This is trying to figure out the LED light bulb emissions to laundry emissions. Okay, I see more answers coming in. The right median answer is 300. Okay, final question. This is about food. How many years of unpackaged food can you consume that generates the same amount of carbon emissions as eating 1 year vegetarian food? So unpackaged meaning the food comes unpackaged, no plastic, paper, any kind of packaging. So the right median answer is about 11 years. So these are difficult quizzes. We tried this quiz with the broader public in North America, and very few people got all right. And so here, this is the results from our survey, where the gray bars are people's answers to each question, and then the red zone is the zone of correct answers depending on where you live. And as you can see, almost nobody is in the red zone. So people are mostly guessing left and right. And when we break that down to political orientation, from extremely conservative to extremely liberal, they're equally wrong. So it doesn't matter. In this knowledge case, political orientation kind of doesn't really matter here. Everybody's wrong. And I think what the lesson here shows is we really need to bridge a knowledge gap of carbon emissions, like nutrition labeling or calorie labeling. We need to know the carbon impact of our choices. And I think this is one way to mitigate that knowledge gap is to provide your carbon emissions. So we did this study with people in the public. This is basically you do a carbon calculator, answering several questions about your lifestyle, and we show your carbon footprint. This is back in 2019, and broken down by different domains. And what we found was just showing your carbon footprint to people can reduce emissions. Well, this is intended emissions in future years. So what we did was, in the control group, we get people to report on their, what they did in 2019, give them a breakdown. In this case, did not give them a breakdown, and ask them for their intentions in 2023, their future actions. There was no change. So without any information on carbon emissions, there was absolutely no change in people's lifestyles. Why would they change, right? That's a control group. Now, in the feedback group, where we presented the feedback, the carbon feedback to people, their future intended emissions were much lower. And a lot of that reduction comes from driving. They were shocked by how much driving emits. And then as a result, they plan or intend to reduce their driving emissions in the future. And this feedback alone can reduce 1.4 tons of CO2. That's equivalent to 12% of carbon emissions per capita, which is equivalent to 700 hamburgers. So show feedback whenever possible to bridge that knowledge gap. Okay, so when it comes to climate change, the current predominant messaging is doom and gloom, right? So terrible things will happen. This is going to be catastrophic. In fact, we're heading into summer in the Northern Hemisphere. It's going to be bad. And the reality is it is bad, and it's probably going to get worse without active interventions. But this doom and gloom narratives are depressing, demoralizing, and also distressing. And it hasn't worked so well so far. So in a global survey with 10,000 youth, 60% of them experience climate anxiety. 84% of the youth are worried about climate change, and 3/4 of them are terrified about the future because of climate change. In a similar Canadian survey, 3/4 of Canadians are worried about climate change and its impacts. So people are worried, rightfully so. But then what is the impact of this worry? Is that making them more likely to act, or that's just simply making them feel worse? So we did a mega study. This is a massive study led by Magdalena. I was one of the participants contributing the Canadian data set to this mega study, where we tested 11 behavioral interventions with almost 60,000 participants from over 60 countries in the world. So here are the 11 interventions we tried. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but I want you to look at the pink line, which is close to the bottom. It's called negative emotions. And that's the intervention that uses the doom and gloom messaging. That's the standard status quo messaging that we see a lot on climate change. So this doom and gloom messaging had absolutely no impact on climate belief. It did not make people more concerned or believe in climate change more. It had zero impact on climate policy support. It did increase people's likelihood, willingness to share this negative information online on social media. And this is partly why we see so much negativity online. Negativity sells, unfortunately. But this doom and gloom messaging discouraged climate action measured in terms of number of trees planted in this task. So the doom and gloom messages actually decreased climate action, backfired, but increased sharing on social media, which is the double negative whammy here. So what can we do instead? So I want to make the case for joy, which is the whole purpose of this talk, is maybe joy is the missing ingredient in the fight against climate change. And this is Howard Thurman. He was the mentor to Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement in the US. And this is my favorite quote from him. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." And I think this is the joy energy that we need, and we really need right now. And I think joy is the only sustainable energy we need to fight any crisis or challenges. Joy can sustain us over the long term, whereas negative emotions like anger, shame, despair, guilt can get us to act in the moment, but it cannot sustain us over the long run. We get burned out, right? It's not great for large-scale, long-term change. And when it comes to climate change, our actions do matter. And we need a lot of people to act quickly. And this collective action complements structural change, not substitutes structural change. In a recent IPCC report, the report basically says demand-side strategies, so coming from consumers, can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by anywhere from 40 to 70% globally. This is a high confidence statement from the IPCC. And I think joy, can really work here. So while climate change may be a polarizing issue, as we saw earlier, the pursuit of happiness is universal. And joy can be the unifying power to bring people together. And this is why we came up with the happy climate approach. This is an active project with Liz Dunn, the world happiness expert. And together with Liz, we came up with a list of high impact actions that I first mentioned in my TED Talk a couple of years ago, including ranging from rearranging or feng shuiing your fridge to civic actions like voting. These are actions that we further summarize in our upcoming book, literally coming out next month, called the Leave the Lights On, where we identified high impact actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also increase happiness at the same time. So let me give you some examples of what those actions could look like. One domain we looked at is just messaging. That's in kind of an easy target to work on. So a lot of environmental messaging focuses on what not to do. So for instance, zero waste, cut out waste, don't waste. Even the word net zero is cutting emissions. So much on bringing emissions down, at least net emissions down to zero. But we'll also see a lot of messaging on eating less meat, drive less, fly less. I think those are messages with good intentions, but may not have the best impact or effect on human behavior. So what we did in the study was we turned these do less bad messages into do more good. So instead of, let's say, eat less meat, we reframed it to be eat more plants. Instead of let's go net zero, we use, cut emissions down to zero. We reframed it to be, accelerate green energy growth. Instead of cut emission or cut pollution, reduce deforestation, we reframe that into increase air quality and support reforestation. So it's a very simple reframe, to encourage the desirable good actions as opposed to minimize or discourage the bad actions. And from our study, a lot of the environmental actions or actually have a higher willingness as a result for people to engage in. We also measured people's happiness for taking this action. This is, again, anticipated happiness. The do more good frame has a higher level of happiness than the do less bad frame. It worked for a lot of actions, but not for every single one. And it backfired for driving. So we still have to figure out how to frame driving. If you have any ideas, very open to your thoughts to reduce driving, how to, come up with a do more good frame for driving. Okay, I think I'm kind of closely monitoring the time, but I want to end on a more positive system change with the happy climate approach, which is the study we just wrapped up, and it's coming out as we speak, where we looked at Vancouver General Hospital. So this is the biggest hospital in British Columbia. And I probably don't need to convince you that hospital food is terrible. The food doesn't taste good. In some cases, it's highly processed. It's high in sugar. A lot of patients don't eat the food that they're given at the hospital. They rely on the food that their family or friends bring them. There's a lot of food waste as a result. So that's one target, or easy target to try to reduce food waste, reduce food-related emissions in the hospital while increasing potentially happiness in patients. So what we did, this intervention in a nutshell, is turn a food desert like the hospital into a fine dining restaurant. So this is what my former student did, who's a physician in the hospital, Annie Lalonde. So at the hospital, what we did was we hired a celebrity chef called Ned Bell, and he revamped the menu that we offered to patients in the hospital to include more plant-forward dishes. So here are some examples. I'm showing you 3 dishes. The middle one is the steelhead trout. It's a local fish with tomato miso dressing. So this dish is actually the most popular. It's absolutely delicious. It's not plant-based. It's really, but it's plant forward because it's a sustainably sourced grown fish in the local area. Now it's cooked in a more delicious way with essentially a great presentation as well. So that's our most popular dish. The bottom right corner is another dish that Ned created. It's the creamy coconut chickpea curry with cauliflower and cashews, served with mango chutney and a Korean gochujang bowl. So it's absolutely delicious. People loved it. It essentially replaced a beef dish we used to offer into this is now a plant-based dish. And what we saw after this menu revamp was the new menu reduced carbon emissions by 50%, just getting rid of beef, lamb, dairy, these high carbon food options. So that halved emissions with the new menu. We measured patient satisfaction after they tried the dishes, they ate the dishes, and the new menu increased patient satisfaction by 33%. And some quotes from the patients. So one patient said the mushroom meatballs that Ned made actually taste better than the real meatballs. Another patient loved the mango chutney, and they also noticed the cashews were unsalted, rightfully so. They need to reduce sodium intake, and the cashews still feel like a small extravagant treat. Another patient just underwent some stomach surgery, and he said, I forgot I was in pain for a little while. So these are, essentially win-win interventions to reduce emissions while increasing happiness in the hospital population. And after the success of our study, which is just accepted at the Lancet Planetary Health Journal, now over 20 hospitals in BC are following our footsteps to revamp their menus to include more plant-forward dishes, which is the start of a movement to increase patient satisfaction, potentially down the line clinical outcomes as well, and reducing environmental footprint of at least in healthcare. Okay, so this is my last quiz question to the group. How many people do you need to get the whole group on board when it comes to human groups? Right, so how many people do you need? Is it one, one very committed person, or two, a minority of 25% of the group to get the whole group on board, or three, 50% of the group? You need half of the group to get on board before the whole group gets on board, or 51% of the group, which is just over the half point. So now it's reaching the majority, or 75% of the group. So in the chat or the Q&A, please put in your answer. How many people do you need to get the whole group on board? So this is the human social tipping point. Okay, so thanks for typing in your answers. So the correct answer, at least in the study, is 25%. And this is a study done by Damon Santola a couple years ago, where he experimentally manipulated the minority proportion. So he tried anywhere from 10% to 40% of the minority in a group, and he found that the sweet spot, the tipping point, is around 25% of the minority. You need at least 25% of the group to act or to change before the entire group jumps on board. So that's the empirically observed switching a tipping point. And this experiment actually has nothing to do with the environment or any social issues. It's a very neutral experiment where, you know, he just literally got people to a small minority to change the social convention in a given human group, which is very clever. So we need to get to 25%. And then this is a real world example in Norway. So this is the hockey stick that we talk about. We need to get to. Governments, companies, organizations love this hockey stick because that shows the diffusion of adoption of a new behavior or innovation or technology to reach 100%. And this case in Norway is the EV adoption. So battery powered EVs are now almost close to 100%. When it comes to new car registrations in Norway. In 2025, it's 92.9, so 93% in Norway, which is amazing. And then I think just this year, more than half of the cars on the road are EVs, which is fantastic. So Norway is the world leading country in EV adoption, and they made it happen within 6 years. So the EV adoption rose from 20% to 80% within just 6 years. So the question is, how did Norway do it? This is an analysis from CNBC. So first, they looked at the government. This is the accumulated sales of EVs in Norway starting 1990 to 2006. They looked at all the slew of government policies implemented to encourage EV adoption, from zero registration tax, free tolls, free parking, zero value-added taxes, so sales tax, and access to bus lanes. These are policies that are unthinkable in North America right now. And we would die for these policies. And we champion for these policies. And yet in Norway, those policies made no impact, absolutely zero impact, close to zero impact on EV adoption. So what worked? So after those policies came in, the good thing is that it sets a good condition, a necessary but not sufficient condition for EV companies to come in. So after 2010, and a large number of companies now have introduced EVs to the Norwegian market, and it was around 2013 then the EV adoption took off. That's the kind of the tipping point. And the reason was, back in the days when the policies were changing, but despite that, there are only 2 models of EVs that are available to consumers. Consumers don't have much of a choice back in the days. But after 2010, they have a lot more choices. What happens with that is EVs were cheaper, parking or charging is way easier, and EVs have gotten much better. It's now an absolute pleasure to drive. So you need ease, reward, you need policies also as a precondition for people to change their behaviors. So I think this is a beautiful example illustrating the combination of ease and reward as the two behavioral ingredients for widespread human behavior change. And I think we need to understand, one, what is making, what is considered easy and rewarding for people, and that partly depends on their motivations and prior ideologies. And we need to make the behavior change feel good and enjoyable for a sustainable future. So that's the take-home message. I want to end my talk here, and thank you so much for your participation in my quizzes and questions. And now let's open up for questions. I'm going to stop share so I can see you and read the questions better.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for such an interesting and informative talk. I feel like I learned so much. We already have a bunch of questions, but people keep them coming, put them in the Q&A box. I'm going to start with our most upvoted question. So, particularly since the impact of individual actions may be small relative to the actions of large corporations and organizations, might these principles be applied effectively in those realms? Or do you think those kind of corporations and organizations call for different approaches?
That's a great question. That's a question I get almost every single time. So the same principles work for organizations too, but it does look, they can take different forms. So so easy and rewarding for organizations. So what does that mean? Let me give you an example of Costco. They're actually, they've done something remarkable by lowering their emissions so far of their products, of their practices, operations. Now I think each warehouse has a sustainability team. And I think I'd also noticed, at least in the Costco's in Vancouver, the carbon heavy products are a lot less, but I see less of them, like beef or cheese in the store, in the warehouse, compared to before. Now, how did Costco do it? One factor is their shareholders, not their customers per se, although their customers do care, but what really drove Costco to change as an organization is the shareholders. The shareholders demanded higher returns on their stock, and especially lower impact, lower emission products in their stores, in their warehouses. And because of the vote from their shareholders, Costco switched policies and practice and operations. And now they have a commitment to net zero, target of net zero now. And I think that also is coupled with a couple of things. Costco, I don't know if you own Costco shares, their shares, essentially their stocks have never been higher. And it's the kind of the only business that survived the pandemic. They took the least hit from the pandemic. Their footprint, their emissions have been going down over the years, despite the fact that their shares of their stock has been going up consistently, despite wars, despite inflation, despite supply shortages. It's kind of an incredible story. So I think if it's rewarding, and the ease is not easy, but I think the shareholders made it easier by the vote. I think these are kind of the ingredients for organizational change. And there are other examples. EVs, as any kind of EV companies can tell you the same story. Their adoption is going up. Their sales are going up compared to their gasoline cars, and the prices are going down, especially the secondhand vehicles, EVs. Now the cars are so great. They are safer. They are a pleasure to drive. They are quiet. Now they're a lot cheaper because charging is way cheaper than pumping gas as of now. So it's another example of ease and reward for both the business and the customers to make change, to make meaningful change. So I think the ingredients are the same, but it can look different depending on what the action is.
Yeah, cool. So while we're on the topic of cars, we've got someone with a thought on the kind of more good reframe phrases and especially for driving. And they say that the socioeconomic logistics of action options for the vehicle choice seem unequal to the other conditions. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. You mean the is it the financial resources or the availability? Like I want to understand the more on the inequality argument.
Yeah, they say socioeconomic logistics of
Logistics of
action. So
action.
I assume just kind of the cost of changing the,
Yeah. The cost of adoption, ease,
yeah,
access. I think that's another one.
yeah.
That's unequal. I agree. But I think the greater adoption drives down the cost. So it equalizes the field as adoption increases. Typically, that's what happens when it comes to EV adoption or bike lanes or food. I think the yeah, it's usually the as one behavior scales, the cost of that usually comes down. And I think there are other policies that governments can implement to help, like incentives or rebates to help with the adoption. But yeah, and it is resources are unequal, but I think it gets more equal as adoption increases. That typically is what happens over time.
Yeah, so I think they're talking specifically about how the messaging, the
Oh,
good versus bad messaging didn't have the same effect for driving as for other things. So
right.
maybe as adoption increases and it's easier to make those choices, then the messaging might be more equivalent or
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
all right, another question from the audience. So people tend to remember negative stories better, while joyful stories don't seem to differ from neutral ones. If people don't remember joyful stories well, how might this influence their subsequent actions?
I like it. It's true. It's why negativity sells. But it doesn't have to be this way. I think with social media, we're focused on engagements, which is the wrong metric. Right? We're looking at click rate, like, repost, comments, etc. While that does generate revenue for the company, it may not help consumers or at least users. And I think that's kind of we don't have a metric for change, for behavior change. And I think people remember negative information more than positive ones. That might be true because that's the negativity bias in memory recall. But that doesn't need to be how we spread change or the reason we spread change. Now, YouTube took off, is, so prevalent because of cat videos, not because of negativity, but because of fun and joy. So I think we need to make climate change feel, or at least climate action feel happy again. Like it doesn't need to be this way just because this is how algorithms work. I think joy is contagious. We just haven't figured out a way to make it joyful because right now it's so negative. And the reason cat videos went spiral, or one way of information diffusion, is this fun, joyful content. I think my argument here is let's make that work for climate action. Maybe not just climate action, for any issue. If we can figure out a way to make it joyful, then I think that could work. We just haven't figured that out yet, at least not until now. And I'm making the case for making things joyful to make it spread.
All right, another question. Are you worried about methodology regarding motivation? External motivation in psychology often works only for the short term, while internal motivation, though harder, can be more sustainable. Also, increased external motivation can then decrease internal motivation in some situations. Are you worried about that? How do you think that plays out in this context?
That's great. Yeah, external motivations are tend not to live long, because when you remove it, people kind of revert back to the before. But I think there are a couple of ingredients here. I think we do need people who are the early adopters, who are the innovators, and they are driven by so the first 25%, I think, for them, intrinsic motivations really matter. They probably are fueled by their intrinsic motivations. But those motivations are not shared by the broad public. I think to get the rest of the people on board, you need extrinsic motivations. That can come in the form of financial incentives. I don't champion punishment or fees or fines. There could be social incentives for people to, look at those people. Wow, how do they do it? I want to do the same. There's the kind of the herding mentality works here too. So I think extrinsic motivations can help get the change started. And then as people repeat the behavior more and keep reaping the benefits, the joy benefits of the behavior, if they do feel happier, and that's a critical condition, is they have to feel happier after engaging in this action, and then they're more likely to repeat it. And then the repetition will lead to some kind of, long-term habitual change, or even identity change, because now I see myself in a different light. That can actually translate into intrinsic motivations down the road. So I don't think we need to use extrinsic motivations forever. I don't think that's the sustainable route. In fact, Norway, because now their EV adoption is near 100%, the policies, all the policies and incentives have been removed because it's just, they don't need that, and they can't afford that also. So extrinsic motivations are temporary, but I think that are critical to get the majority on board.
Cool. All right, we've got two questions about the bottle return study. So the first one, how might inherent differences around the decider, so SES differences, other differences, interact with their probability preference? Kind of the sure thing return per bottle versus the 1% chance to win a larger return.
That's right. So we did look at income in our sample, and income, at least in our sample, didn't have an impact. I think partly because we didn't have binners. So binners are a group of people, at least in Vancouver, that they collect bottles for a living, at least to supplement part of the income. So we didn't have them in our sample. So for them, I think I don't have the data, but I think we need to we need to ask them for their preferences. And second, because the expected payoff is the same, like it's not that we're exploiting people. Real lotteries are exploitative. Like you lose money over the long run. That's why I'm not saying we should make money out of people from recycling bottles. But because the returns are the same, the expected returns are the same, that eventually if they just return big bags of bottles over time, they're going to get the same payoff. So objectively speaking, there's no difference in payoff. And we're also not saying they should get rid of the 10-cent guaranteed option. What we're saying is add the lottery, the probabilistic option in addition. So people have a choice as opposed to remove one and replace it with just the lottery option. So in terms of equity, they have a choice. It's their choice. They're not being worse off by choosing any one. It's just more fun, at least for people who don't necessarily care about the 10 cents to have the lottery option there.
All right, you may have just answered this, but I'm gonna read the question anyways. So for the bottle recycling, what was the socioeconomic profile of the study participants, and how does that compare to the profiles of people who use bottle refund facilities outside of study simulations in real life? Are actual recyclers going to show the same behavioral patterns?
Yeah, so there are people from the public, and demographic-wise, they are pretty representative of the city residents, not as the country, because that's a broader demographic. But as the city demographic, it's pretty similar. So we're not biasing the sample one way or the other. We do have some low-income folks as well as some high-income folks, and a lot of them do recycle. So I think we're getting a somewhat representative chunk of the public. But speaking to the income issue, yes, we're not getting rid of the 10-cent guaranteed option. I think what our study shows is people in general like the lottery option. And if we provide that option, that could, in addition, right, that could incentivize or increase the recycling rate. Yeah.
All right, about the hospital study and the plant-based diet. Was the cost and nutrient content for the plant-forward diet roughly the same as the original meat-based diet?
Yep.
In this person's location, hospitals wouldn't have the extra money for plant-based diets if those are more expensive.
Great question. Cost-wise, it is cost. Well, that initial study in the first hospital is costly, obviously, because we have to redesign the menu and change the whole supply chain. But in the scaling phase, where now more than 20 hospitals are following suit, the cost is much lower because we'll give them the recipes. We tell them which vendors to go with. In terms of the cost of the ingredients, it's not more expensive. It's actually, I think, about on par with the meat-based options. Now, the other thing is nutrient. We do have a whole nutritional analysis in the paper, which I didn't show, but nutrition-wise, the plant-based or plant-forward dishes actually are higher in several domains, in terms of micronutrients or fiber, protein level is the same, less salt, less fat, less sugar by a lot. So nutritionally, the plant-forward menu is better than the meat-based or the status quo menu. So that's like another reason to adopt plant-forward dishes.
Planning. All right, so from the nitty-gritty to a big picture question, I wonder about your thoughts on an even earlier stage of decision-making, i.e. in what options people even consider as possible actions they can take, and whether that could be a valuable point of influence.
Yeah, that's a great question. Possibility sometimes is hard to portray without visualizing it or seeing it in real life. Take transportation. We did not have shared bikes in the past. Now it's possible. Now we have shared EVs. Now we have shared e-scooters that to replace cars, replace driving in the city. So I think possibilities are important, but just by pure imagination, it's going to be hard. I think you need to actually see it. This is why I think seeing something is contagious. It's, oh, wow, I see that now. I want to try it. I want to buy it. I want to use it. In fact, there's a study done in California with solar panel adoption. So solar panels are literally contagious. Ken Gillingham, who's an economist who quantified this. So essentially, if I see my neighbor install solar panels in their roof, I'm much more likely to do the same. So there's a spreading, at least in the neighborhood level, of solar panels. The same spreading happens with EVs as well. So I think possibility is important, but it's best visualized as opposed to imagined.
Very cool. All right, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you again for a wonderful talk. Attendees, right now in the chat, there will be a link to a survey that you can please fill out. And if you don't have time to do it right now, it will also get emailed to you. We always look at your feedback. It helps us to decide who to invite in the future, how we might change things up. We will be returning next year with some more talks, so stay tuned for announcements of who might be joining us next year. And again, thank you, JZ, for a wonderful presentation and all of you for taking the time to join us. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.